This is Here's How, Ireland's political, social and current affairs podcast, presented by William Campbell.
Thank you for downloading episode 77 of Here's How for the 22nd of August 2018. We thought Michael D. Higgins would be nodded through for a second term without an election, but now maybe not. Many people have expressed an interest in being a candidate. In this podcast, I talk to one who's seeking a nomination.
Here's How is Ireland's political, social and current affairs podcast. Make your view heard. Just dial 076 603 5060 and tell the world what you're thinking. Your voicemail may be included in the next podcast. You can find tips on recording your contribution and other ways to contact the show at here'show.ie/call.
Coming up on today's podcast.
There is too much abuse of citizens going on, and I would like to be a president for the voiceless and a president for all of the Irish people. And also that we could send out a message that in Ireland we have zero tolerance for corruption.
That's coming up in a moment. But first, just a reminder that I'm trying to expand the podcast to make it more frequent and have more time to put into chasing guests and doing research. So I've set up a page on Patreon, which is basically a website where you can make a pledge to donate a set amount to support each podcast that I make. I want to thank the people who signed up recently, and if you can manage $1 or $2 after spending €160 on RTE, I'd really appreciate it. You can find the link on the website www.here'show.ie. We've had Gemma O'Doherty on the podcast before, but just this week, she has announced her intention to be a candidate for President of Ireland. Gemma, I had first on my list a question, why do you want to be President? But actually, I think there's a more important question. Do you want to be President? Are you doing this to gain attention for the causes that you report on, or are you doing it intending to actually be President?
Well, most definitely the former, and thanks very much for inviting me on to the podcast. I've thought long and hard about this. It's never been my intention as a journalist to go into political life. We would see that as moving to the dark side, so there have been very serious questions in my head for the last few weeks about this. However, I see a lot of support from the public for the message that I believe needs to get out, and that is the reason I have chosen to stand. I will be standing on an anti-corruption message. That is the message that I believe most strongly in. I believe that our toxic culture of corruption in Ireland is the main reason why the country is on its knees today. It's nothing to do with lack of money or lack of resources. It is because the governing elite, through their greed and through their corruption, have decimated our country once again. And the message that I want to get out is that.
So to be clear, you're not expecting to be in the Áras by Christmas?
No, I certainly would not consider doing this unless I was going to win. I don't do anything in my life without intending to succeed. And I don't want to sound arrogant, but I believe that I have a strong public mandate, and that the public want a change. They're sick and tired of the same mistakes being made time and time again. They are very frustrated at the plight of vulnerable citizens losing their homes. They know that they could be next. They do not want to see our most vulnerable children sleeping in Garda stations. And I think an awful lot of people want to bring the compassion back to Ireland. We used to be a very compassionate society. We are a compassionate people, but we have lost our compassion. And that is, I would be putting that firmly at the door of government, who in recent months have really shown a very serious selfishness and disregard for our citizens who really are in trouble.
Can I read, Gemma, just your statement that you issued on Facebook? And I'll just read a couple of paragraphs of it. It says, and you're saying, for many years you've been telling me your stories of crippling injustice at the hands of the state, the health service, the Gardaí, the courts, the banks. In my work as an investigative journalist, I have witnessed firsthand the despicable treatment of citizens who have stood up and tried to fight for their basic rights, the right to truth and justice for their murdered loved ones, the right to a proper police force that protects and serves them, their right to decent healthcare and affordable housing, their right to a reliable, publicly owned water supply, safe food and a clean environment, their right to proper care for their most vulnerable family members and friends, their right to freedom of speech and expression, their right to a free press, their right to a life that is worth living. That's something that I think almost everybody would agree with every line on. Can you tell me how you running for president, or indeed you becoming president, advances any of those?
Well, I mean, yes, and I will say that all of those rights are being abused in Ireland on a daily basis. So what I would like to do with the presidency is to become a sanctuary for those people whose rights are being abused by the state. Now, people will say, oh, you can't do that. I would say, yes, we can. We certainly can. We know that other presidencies have highlighted subjects like the diaspora, etc. Mm-hmm. Why could a presidency not highlight corruption? Why could a presidency not highlight homelessness and the fact that young people cannot afford to buy homes? Mm-hmm. I can see absolutely no problem with that. And I would be willing to tackle all of society's ills in relation to the current suffering of our citizens. I would highlight them on a regular basis. It is the role of the presidency to show concern for the people and to be the guardian of the Constitution and to make sure that people's rights are being protected. And anyone who says otherwise, I utterly disagree with them.
You're talking there about essentially the soft power of the presidency, and that's been used extensively by recent presidents. You mentioned the diaspora, particularly highlighted by Mary McAleese. Liberal causes that were at that time very weak were highlighted and perhaps advanced by Mary Robinson. But there are also constitutional duties for the president. As you see it, what's the constitutional role of the president?
Well, I mean, obviously there's plenty of roles in terms of signing bills, etc. And, that's where the lawyers would come in. I am not a constitutional lawyer. And, I would have an awful lot of expertise behind me. Mainly thanks to my career in journalism, mm-hmm. Where I've got to know an awful lot of experts. But really what I would be calling for is that the message that I would be sending out is that people's rights have to be protected and respected. Mm-hmm. And any legislation that would come before me as president that I felt was not protecting the rights of citizens, well, I would take that very, very seriously and consult very hard on it. And I feel that the current presidency maybe could have taken some legislation more seriously in terms of, a lot of bills have been rubber stamped. And there's a lot of concern about that.
Yeah, but hold on a second, Gemma. There is perhaps people have been watching too much West Wing or other political dramas. There's a misapprehension that the Irish presidency has somehow the right to veto or influence legislation. An Irish president can either sign a bill or send it to the Supreme Court, and there are technical reasons why sending it to the Supreme Court is not a good idea in almost all cases. They don't have the option to refuse to sign or to veto a bill. So that level of influence is limited to the point of being roughly zero, isn't it?
Well, I'm not so sure about that, and that is where the legal advice would come in. And I will stress again that I am not a constitutional lawyer, and I don't believe that I need to be. Mm-hmm. But a president, first and foremost, must represent the needs of the people and must speak out, especially at times of national crisis, which I believe we are in at the moment. Mm-hmm. And I won't get into the technicalities of the Constitution.
Sure, because, and I don't want you to do that, and neither you nor I are lawyers, and this is not a podcast aimed at lawyers. But on a moral basis, if there was a law passed that was constitutional in the sense that it was permitted within the Constitution, but that you personally utterly objected to. Say, for example, one that facilitated a certain tycoon taking over much more control of the media. is there that or any other issue that you would say, I would resign rather than signing that bill?
All of my actions as president would be carried out in the public interest. I have very grave concerns about freedom of speech and freedom of expression in Ireland. Mm-hmm. And there is a toxic culture at the moment, that exists in Ireland, whereby certain people feel frightened to give their views. Now, freedom of speech is a cornerstone of democracy, and as is a free press. We do not have a free press, and as a result of that, we have an awful lot of the problems that exist. Because if our journalists were allowed to do their job and to hold power to account, we would have a much better government and a much better democracy. So these are issues, yes, that I feel very, very strongly about, because free speech, freedom of expression and a free press are fundamental.
But if it came to the line, is there anything that you would say, I will resign rather than sign that?
I can't. That's too hypothetical a question. But certainly, as far as media interests are concerned, that is my area of expertise as a journalist, and I have grave concerns about the media in Ireland, and especially some of the elite in the state broadcaster who I believe have really become a voice box for government. And, these are the issues that I intend to speak out on. And if people have a problem with that, so be it.
Okay, one thing that I want to focus on, and I want to first of all acknowledge that you have highlighted stories that really have been, to say underreported doesn't begin to describe it, particularly the very brutal murder of Father Niall Malloy, the missing person presumed murder of the young girl Mary Boyle, also the case of the murder of Raynard Murray, and those stories have been covered extensively by you, and that's valuable not just for the coverage but for the fact that they have been largely ignored both by the press and by RTE. But I want to just take you up on a couple of other stories. You mentioned that, the soft power of the president in the sense of what you can do without actually necessarily being able to legislate. But is it possible that you've raised some stories that are maybe more suited to conspiracy theory websites? And I'll name a couple that I'm referring to, one of which relates to Hillary Clinton's health. And there's an organization called the IRA, which is another one we think of. It's the Internet Research Agency. It's an arm of Russian military intelligence. And it has been traced to them a story that they fabricated and promoted on social media to imply that Hillary Clinton was seriously ill during the 2016 general presidential election. You promoted that story quite heavily. That wasn't really very professional, was it?
Oh, absolutely. I stand over anything in relation to what I said regarding the Clintons. Mm-hmm. And, this again was an example of people not wanting to hear both sides. And the reason why, the biggest so-called democracy in the States has ended up with Donald Trump as president is because people were not being listened to. People had very serious concerns about corruption in relation to the Clintons, and those.
Sure. But specifically, the claim that Hillary Clinton was very seriously ill and that this was being covered up, that was a simply untrue claim made up by Russian military intelligence, promoted by their internet trolls, essentially, and also shared by you.
Well, no, actually, I think you'll find what I shared was some of the very serious concerns about Hillary Clinton and some of her performances, which I believe the public had a right to know about.
Okay, fair enough. One other one, I accept that. I accept that that's the case. But one other one, a story promoted by you that Lester Holt, who was a very experienced NBC host in the United States, and he was the host of one of the presidential debates, a story alleging that they had secret hand signals whereby Hillary Clinton was giving secret hand signals to Lester Holt.
Really, this is just such nonsense. We are living in a country where murder is being covered up by our police force. The murder of children, the murder of a child in Donegal, Mary Boyle. We are living in a country that is crippled with corruption. People tonight are worried about losing their homes, and I'm not going down the road of conspiracy theorists and all that. To me, my message to people, anyone who would say that I am a conspiracy theorist, they are the conspiracy theorists.
Okay, one other one, Gemma. I accept what you're saying on that, but I mean, these are questions I have to put to you. One of them about a guy called Jerry Beads. Jerry Beads was an associate of Bertie Ahern in his Dublin Central constituency. He was a member of Fianna Fáil. He borrowed heavily and got caught in the property crash. He then subscribed to, and I'm not suggesting that you were involved in this, by the way, but Jerry Beads subscribed to a conspiracy theory called Freemen on the Land that essentially was a theory that people could get away without paying their debts. And he took a court case saying that because the Ulster Bank had changed its name, that his various millions of euro in debts should be regarded as void. He should be allowed to keep the money and not have to pay it back. He was prominent in what was called the New Land League. Those guys were shysters, weren't they?
What has that question got to do with me?
Well, it's that you were promoting a thing, and you said specifically that Ireland attempted for barristers to go back to law school with Jerry Beads. Jerry Beads took several legal cases that were thrown out of court that were entirely ridiculous.
Well, I certainly would dispute any association between me and Jerry Beads.
Okay.
Now, what I will say about the Right to Housing organisation, which I believe he is involved in, is that they are doing excellent work on the ground. So many of our citizens who are being thrown out of their homes are having to become lay litigants because they cannot find lawyers to represent them. And I know that Jerry Beads, from the little knowledge that I have, is working with some of those people and he's helping them.
Okay. What's your route to get on the ballot paper?
My route is through the Oireachtas, and I will be looking for 20 nominations from deputies and senators. Sinn
Féin have said, although they haven't announced a candidate, that they have said that they will be running a candidate. They have the capacity to do that. They have, I think, about 27 or 28 members of the Oireachtas. They will obviously not be supporting you. Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael have both said that they will support Michael D. Higgins. I can imagine that Labour will do that as well. How many TDs are left there, out of whom you need to get 20 names?
Well, there are sufficient numbers there when you combine deputies and senators. We have some very, very fine independents. Public representatives who would be singing off the exact same hymn page as myself. So there's, I'm sure the support is there. I certainly know that the public support is there for somebody who wants to tackle the greatest evil in our country at the moment, which is corruption. So I believe I have a public mandate to do that. And I know as we speak, the response overnight has been overwhelming. I'm not saying that's anything to do with me, but it is to do with what I stand for and what I want to take on. And I know that an awful lot of members of the public have been in contact with their public representatives and have been urging them to get this message out. It is a message that people
Have you taken any soundings? Have you taken any soundings from any of the potential, the Oireachtas members who you view as potential nominees, people who would nominate you?
Well, that's ongoing.
You're in that process.
Of course.
If you had, in a sentence, to say why people should vote for you as President of Ireland next October, what would that be?
Well, I suppose my main message is anti-corruption. I really believe we can turn our country around if we send out a very strong signal that we have had enough of this. People are no longer going to have their rights abused by the state. There is too much abuse of citizens going on, and I would like to be a president for the voiceless. And a president for all of the Irish people, and also that we could send out a message that in Ireland we have zero tolerance for corruption. This is going to be the new Ireland. We need a new Ireland. We have to stop making the mistakes of the past time and time again. We're a very rich country and there's absolutely no need for all of the suffering that's going on at the moment.
Gemma O'Doherty, that was more than one sentence, but I think you got your message across clearly. Thank you very much for talking to me.
Thank you.
If you like the Here's How podcast, please rate and review the show on iTunes and other podcast providers. Share it on Facebook and Twitter. Tell your friends. But most of all, make your views heard. Call us on 076 603 5060.
Go to the website for sources and references for everything we were talking about. And while you're there, please like the show on Facebook, follow at Here's How Podcast on Twitter, and follow Gemma O'Doherty at GemmaOD1. And get in touch with me if you can suggest a guest or topic for a future show. Also, you can find out how to subscribe to the podcast for free on your computer, on your phone, or by email. It's all at www.here'show.ie. And finally, there's a link to my Patreon account there, so if you'd like to make a small donation which would help me make the podcast more frequent with more research, I'd really appreciate that. The Here's How podcast is produced and presented by me, William Campbell. Thank you for listening.